Let's get started with the first step in the problem-solving methodology. The first step in the problem-solving methodology is the hardest, creating the problem definition. But as John Dewey explained, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. John Dewey, you may know from the Dewey Decimal System. This creation of the problem definition is the most critical step in the problem-solving methodology. Just a quick reminder of where we are in our depiction of the problem-solving methodology. We are starting in this loop with defining the problem. Creating a problem definition is actually an iterative process that occurs as you synthesize existing information about the problem. Starting with an iterative process as the first step in a methodology is definitely challenging. Creating a problem definition is a test of your team's flexibility and tolerance for each other's ideas. As you review the existing information about the problem, informed discussion among team members should occur. You may feel that you are talking in circles. It may get a bit frustrating, but this is all due to the nonlinear nature of thinking through a problem in order to put it into one clear statement. Let this process flow so that the best possible definition can emerge. John Dewey was right. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. What should you be thinking about and looking for in existing information in order to create a problem definition? Well, the key aspects of a problem statement are essential when you're doing your research. The key aspects of the problem statement are listed here, and we're going to go through them one by one with application to our example of the high infant mortality rate in Baltimore City, starting with the nature of the problem. First, it's important to determine that the problem is, in fact, a public health problem. Seems simple, but actually is very important. The problem should be considered in terms of the health of a population rather than an individual. It should be a public health problem. Problems of clinical management of patients, not oftentimes determined to be a public health problem. If you are new to public health, you may be asking, is infant mortality a public health problem? The answer very simply is yes. The infant mortality rate is considered a key indicator of overall health and standard of living for a population. It is considered one of the most sensitive health indicators of a population and is regularly estimated for cities, states, and countries all over the world. Additionally, the infant mortality rate affects other public health indicators. For example, the infant mortality rate contributes to the years of potential life lost than mortality in any other age group. The nature of the problem is more than just determining whether the problem is a public health problem. The nature of the problem must also be focused into a manageable size. If you are too broad, the problem may no longer be a public health problem if it crosses into other fields such as economic or political problems. For example, poverty. It's an important risk factor for so many disease outcomes. However, poverty is not only a public health problem, but an economic, social, geographical, and political problem. The next key aspect of the problem definition is framing the problem. Framing involves three concepts: person, place, and time. First, framing the problem in relation to person starts by asking, who is affected by this problem? It is important to be as specific as possible when determining who is affected. And really, it's determining who is the most affected by the problem. You can use basic demographics to describe people most affected, but you can also use problem-specific demographics, such as sexual orientation or injection drug use for problems regarding HIV, housing situation for mental health illnesses, and occupation for problems related to environmental or occupational exposures. Notice the figure in this slide of infant mortality rates by race. Notice that all races, depicted here in the black line with diamonds, this line gives us the overall infant mortality rate for all races. When we divide out, separate out Black individuals, we see that infant mortality rate is much higher as depicted in the red triangles and red bar. The red line with triangles above the all races represents the infant mortality rate for Black individuals. The red line with squares below the all races line represents the infant mortality rate for white individuals. So you can definitely see there is a difference in the infant mortality rate by race. And this is important because it helps us answer that piece of who is most affected by this problem. This idea that the infant mortality rate is higher in Black individuals as compared with whites is very important. It's a critical piece of information that we will be including in our problem statement. Place is the next of the three concepts when framing the problem. Framing the problem in relation to place starts by asking, where is the problem located? Again, it's important to be as specific as possible, but to remember that the concept of where is not restricted solely by geographic boundaries. Cultural, social, political, economic, historical, and ethnic boundaries may also be drawn around problems. In this figure, we see the infant mortality rate over time in Baltimore City and in the state of Maryland. The rate is consistently higher in Baltimore City, which is depicted with the black line and the diamonds, as compared to the state of Maryland, which is depicted with the dashed line and the X's. This figure tells us that there is a problem with high infant mortality rate in Baltimore City as compared to this state. You'll also notice, although at this point we're talking about place, people who made this figure included race, not only place, in this figure. You'll notice that they've drawn African American infant mortality rate in with the gray line and the squares, and the rates for whites with the gray line and the triangles. This is a good reminder for us that people most affected by the high infant mortality rate are Black infants, and we've also added a new component about the problem, that the rate is higher in Baltimore City than in the state of Maryland. We can take our investigation of place one step further. This is a map of the different neighborhoods in Baltimore City. The darker shades of red indicate higher infant mortality rates among infants in the drawn neighborhoods. For example, sections 12, 47, and 24 are among the neighborhoods with high rates. With this information, we can start to focus in on neighborhoods with the highest infant mortality rates in Baltimore City. We will need to decide if we want to specify these neighborhoods in our problem definition, or if we will describe place as Baltimore City and use the information in this map to guide interventions to the neighborhoods of highest infant mortality rates in hopes to see the largest decreases in the infant mortality rate if we intervene upon those neighborhoods with the highest rates. Finally, time is the last of the three concepts when framing the problem. Framing the problem in relation to time starts by asking, what is the specific time frame for the problem? Again, we are going to be as specific as possible with defining a time frame, which could be anchored in calendar time, or it could be anchored by a specific event. This figure depicts the infant mortality rate over time in Baltimore City in the blue lines with filled circle data points. You'll notice that the line jumps around a bit, and there's no clear trend in the rate increasing or decreasing from 1997 to 2009. You may ask, well, what did this rate look like before 1997? Was it high? I don't know the specific answer to that question, and I'm not sure who does. The data that are available start in 1997, so it's possible estimates prior to that time just aren't available. What we can say from this figure is that the infant mortality rate in Baltimore City has been high for at least a decade. You may also be asking, well, why does the data stop in 2009? Aren't there more recent data available? And the answer to that question is yes, and we will see those data in just a little bit. But this story of responding to the high infant mortality rate in Baltimore City started in 2009. So to simulate the data that would be available at that time when the mayor called and said, do something, we have decided to show you data from that time. In this figure, it ends in 2009. The next key aspect of the problem definition is the specificity of the problem. A broad problem statement is going to be hard to apply to the problem-solving methodology. It may run the risk of containing competing concepts or it may run the risk of crossing into fields outside of public health. My general rule of thumb is that it is hard to be too specific when writing a problem definition. So your first attempt at writing a problem definition should incorporate the idea of being as specific as possible. The next key aspect of the problem definition is avoiding causal claims. Be careful not to include etiologic factors or causes in the problem definition. The problem definition should always avoid causal claims. The problem definition is a statement of the problem, not a statement of the solution to the problem. The last key aspect of the problem definition is language. The problem definition is actually a statement, a single sentence. The language should be clear and precise. It should avoid technical terms, but if they are necessary, they must be defined or referenced. Local terms are encouraged, but again, a definition is necessary. Finally, make sure you have used proper grammar and sentence structure for your single sentence problem definition. To wrap up the key aspects of the problem definition, we've put together a do's and don't list for our problem definitions. The don'ts include the most frequent violations of the appropriate problem definition. You can use this as a check of your problem definition. Don't state the definition of a topic. Be more focused. Do be clear in defining the population or subpopulation most affected by the problem, and always incorporate place and time if you can. Don't mention key determinants of the problem or make causal claims. Don't suggest a solution in the problem. It's a problem definition, not the solution. Let's pause here. Take a minute to stretch, take a breath, and then complete a work it out exercise. For this work it out exercise, please write a problem statement for the infant mortality rate in Baltimore City given the data that we have reviewed thus far. We'll compare results in the next video.